What is up, you guys? My name is Aubrey and this is my channel, and today I'm going to be talking about how I saved $20,000 in just about 6 months. So I'm going to be giving you guys my top tips on how to effectively save money, how to cut out frivolous expenses, and how to really make your spending and your money habits as efficient as possible. So let's get started. So 2 comments I want to address before we get started. Number 1 is, in this video, I don't want to go over the cookie cutter pieces of advice that you can get in every single financial blog or financial YouTube video out there. We all know the basics of finance, which is if you want to save money, you need to first figure out how much money you're making. You need to figure out what you're spending it on, and you need to figure out what of those expenses are frivolous expenses and how much of that can you cut out. Saving in its simplest form are those 3 things. And so I don't want to discuss those 3 things in this video because it's just redundant at this point. The other thing that I want to address is the inevitable comment that's going to come up, which is it's easy to save $20,000 in 6 months if you're making a lot of money. And I agree with that statement. And because of that, it's important to look at savings from a percentage of income basis. For me, saving $20,000 in 6 months is roughly about 28 to 30% of my income for that same period of time. And so it's important to look at it from that same perspective. Your goal isn't necessarily to save $20,000 in 6 months. Instead, your goal is to save between 28 and 30% of your income in 6 months. So with that being said, let's dig into the first tip. So the first piece of advice that I have is actually something that Matt D'Avella said in one of his YouTube videos, and it's the 3-day rule. Now, he talked about this in one of his YouTube videos, I think like 6 months ago or something, and I absolutely love this rule, and for me, it's been life-changing as far as my financial situation goes. And what the 3-day rule is it's basically saying if you are making a purchase that would be considered a frivolous purchase. Now, I don't include things like business expenses or food or rent in this category. But if you see something that you want to buy, don't buy it right then. Instead, wait 3 days and then make the decision after that 3-day point. If after 3 days you still want to make that purchase and you feel like you can afford it, then go ahead and buy it. But more often than not, you'll be surprised at how often you will end up just passing on the purchase altogether. For me, the 3-day rule has quite honestly been life-changing because it has allowed me to really step back and think about all the purchases that I've made in the past that probably were not purchases that I should have made. It allows me to decide whether I actually want an item or whether I'm allowing my emotions to get the best of me. And for me, it's cut out a lot of those frivolous expenses that I would have most definitely regretted at some point in the future, and as a result, I've been able to save more money in the process. So if you're somebody who makes a lot of impulse purchases like I used to, I highly encourage you to check out the 3-day rule and give it a try. If you find a product that you want, don't purchase it right then. Give it 3 days and then make a decision after that. My second tip for you guys is to use Mint.com. Now, I have talked about Mint.com a lot on this channel. I'm not affiliated with them or sponsored with them. I just absolutely love the service so much. And you don't necessarily have to use Mint.com specifically. There's a lot of websites that do the same thing, but I've always used Mint, and I really do think that the service is life-changing. Mint.com is an online kind of budget creation and spending tracking service. It's free to use, and all you have to do is connect all of your bank accounts, all of your credit accounts, all of your investment accounts to Mint.com, and then it automatically tracks your expenses. And after you've used the service for a while, it will start automatically categorizing your expenses on where you've spent it and what percentage of your income you've spent on those purchases. For me, whenever I first started using Mint.com, it was a pretty big eye-opener to see how many little purchases I was making and how those accumulated to be really large purchases. Like many of you, I'm somebody who will not think twice about buying an item if it's like $4 or $5. If I see something that I need, I'll be like, oh, it's just $4, not a big deal. Oh, it's just $6. Oh, it's just $8. And if it's something that's like under 20 bucks, I normally have never put a lot of thought into purchasing it. But the thing is, even $5 purchases add up. And for me, I noticed on Mint.com that I was making so many of these small purchases that ended up accumulating to be hundreds of dollars at the end of the month. And I would have never realized how much money it was if I hadn't started using a service like Mint. For me, Mint.com has been an absolute game changer because of the fact that it really points out when and where you're spending your money and how you can cut back on your spending in order to save more money. The next tip that I have for you guys is to simplify your life and to figure out what things you actually need. Someone once told me that the secret to growing wealth is to keep your life simple, because the more complexity you add to your life, the more that life is going to cost. And the example that they gave me was the fact that there's so many people who start here with their income and their spending is right here. They're able to make it, but it's really close at the end of the month. But then they end up getting a raise or they grow in their career and now their income's here. But as a result, they also buy a nicer car, they buy a nicer house, and now their expenses have increased here. And this is an endless cycle that so many people get stuck in. And as a result, their income and their expenses continue to grow together. And as a result, they're never able to increase their savings or their investment rate. And so they're kind of stuck in this endless hamster wheel that never allows them to step back. Because if they do step back, or if they lose their jobs, or if they lose an income stream, then they're going to be absolutely screwed because of the fact that though their income has been so high over the last few years, their expenses have been equally as high, and as a result, there's no kind of wiggle room for any sort of decrease in income. And it ends up being a quite dangerous hamster wheel to be in that never allows you to take a break or to stop working or have any sort of financial security despite the fact that you're making good money. This is something that I have been extremely cognizant of over the last few years. And even though in my career and over the last 6 to 8 years, my income has started to grow and continues to grow, my expenses are virtually the same as they were whenever I was 20 years old, making 25% of what I'm making today. A few examples of how I've kept my life simple and I've kept my expenses down as low as possible is by not having a car payment. My personal car is a 1997 4Runner. In fact, it was the very first car I got when I was 16 years old, and it has no car payment at all. I could absolutely afford a nicer car, but I also know that if I did buy a nicer car, it would come with an increase in insurance costs, maintenance costs, and also just the car payment in general. And for me, having a nicer car at this stage of my life isn't worth the cost that would come along with that. And my final tip for you guys is something that I think a lot of us have heard on and off on the internet and probably from our parents or from relatives, but that is to not save the money that you have left over at the end of the month, but to spend the money that you have after saving. Of course, you want to take into account your fixed expenses like rent, utilities, food, water, electricity, and things like that. You don't want to save and sacrifice those necessities. But once you've paid those necessities off and you know that you have a place to live, you've covered your four walls, it's now time to save that money. And once you've saved a good portion of your money and once you feel good about the amount that you've saved, you can then move on to spending. And you can move on to doing things like we've talked about, like spending on things that you need rather than things you want. And spending on things you want after you've given 3 days to really think about it. Now, I absolutely understand that saving money is one of those things that is easier said than done. I think far too often people are too flippant with how they approach saving, and they simply say, just save your money or decrease your spending. And saving money is hard for all of the reasons that I talked about in this video, because of shiny object syndrome, because of fear of missing out, because of instant gratification. And because of these things, it really is a matter of training your brain that you don't need the newest and best thing. You don't need to impress your friends and family. You don't need to spend money on something that you want this moment, and that it's okay to wait to make that purchase. But once you practice these methods and you practice these habits, and if you're consistent with them, you will eventually get to the point where these habits are deeply ingrained into your brain, and it then suddenly becomes easy to save. If you would have asked me 10 years ago if I would enjoy making and saving money more than I enjoy spending it, I would have told you that you're crazy. But after 6 or 7 years of doing these things that I'm talking about in this video, I've finally gotten to the point where I don't feel the need to spend my money on things that make me look cool or make me look successful or make me feel good. So with that being said, you guys, I would love to hear your thoughts on this video. What are your saving techniques and how have you approached saving recently in your own life? I would love to hear your thoughts on that, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.